All right, hello everybody. We're going to get started today with this puzzle. It's called Ken, and it's kind of like Sudoku in that you are going to be placing numbers into a grid, and you're going to be following a certain set of rules, and it's basically a logic puzzle. So to get started, what you need to do is take a piece of paper and make a 4x4 grid, and then once the 4x4 grid is made, darken these outer boundaries and put the symbols into the corners of the boxes. So pause here and do that, and then come back and I'll explain the rest. Okay, so the rules are as follows. You have to place the numbers 1 through 4 into every row and every column. So there must be all 4 numbers 1 to 4 in every horizontal row and in every vertical column. And the only other rule is the numbers that you place within these darkened regions have to do what it says in the corner. So these 2 numbers here that I'm pointing to would have to add up to 4. And these 3 numbers would somehow have to multiply to 12, right? When it says divide, it can divide forwards or backwards. And the same thing with minus, can minus 4 forwards or backwards. And so we're just trying to use logic to fill in the sections. So the first one is the easiest one. We're just going to put a 4 in the box that says 4, because it has to be a single box that adds up to 4, so there's only one way to do that. All right, so I'd like you to look around the grid and see if there is anything that you can deduce about how to place the next numbers. And again, you can pause and try to place a couple and then come back. All right, so the next thing that I was thinking is, in order to add up to 4, I would have to use a 3 and a 1. And that's because I can't use 2 and 2 on the same line, right? You can't repeat a number on the same line because then you wouldn't get all 4 numbers there. So it's got to be a 3 and a 1 in some way. I'm not exactly sure how those will go. So what I'll do is put a tiny little 3 and 1 on the outside of that section just to remind me that that's what I'm going to end up using. All right, now for another number that I can figure out, let's look around here. I have a 12 that's got to be formed here, and I have a 5 that's got to be formed across here. All right, so let's think about how this could go. If this must be 3 and 1 in some order, then I'm only left with a possibility of a 2 in that block. So just to recap that, every row must have every number from 1 to 4. And I already have a 4, and I know I need a 3 and a 1, so this one has to be a 2. Which means that these last 2 boxes, if the whole thing is going to multiply to 12, these last 2 boxes have to multiply to 6. Well, there's only one way I can do that, right? And it's got to be a 3 times a 2. But since I already have a 2 in this column, I can't have another 2 below it, so that's got to be the 3, and then this has to be the 2. So these 3 numbers multiply to 12, 2 times 3 times 2, and I have not repeated any 2's vertically or any 2's horizontally. It's okay to have more than 1 2 in the same bold region, it just can't be twice in the same row or the same column. Okay, so now look across at the 5. We should all be able to get the 5 plus over here now. So just pause for a second and try to figure out how those are going to go. All right, so you know you have a 4 and a 1 remaining, because 1, 2, 3, 4 across. And we've already used the 4 in the last column, so the only place I can put a 4 here would be in the 3rd spot, and then that would leave a 1 here. All right, and so the next thing that you could do, potentially, is figure out how this column is going to go. Think about it, I've only got a 3 and a 2 left, and the bottom part has to divide to give me a 2. Now, there's no way that I can use a 3 with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 and divide and get 2. It's impossible. So I know that the 3 is going to have to go here with the 5, which, by the way, makes this a 2, since those have to add up to 5. And then my 2 would have to be here. And so this could either be 2 divided by 1, or it could be 4 divided by 2. Those are my choices. And since I've already got a 4 above it, I can't do 4 divided by 2. I'm going to have to do 2 divided by 1. Remember, division can go backwards, so that's allowed. All right, so go ahead and fill in the top now, because we know we only have one number left for the 3rd column. All right, so I know this had to be a 3, which means this had to be a 1, You see, it really starts to fall into place once you get the first few. Okay, I've got a 3 minus, so I need numbers that are 3 apart. The only way to do that is 4 and 1. And so, since I already have a 1 vertically, I can put a 4 underneath it, which means this has to be the 1, so I subtracted backwards, which is totally legal. And 7 plus must be 4 plus 3, so I'm just going to arrange these that I don't repeat anything going up the row, up the column, I mean. So a 4 here and a 3 here should do it. Again, this puzzle is called Ken-Ken, so I'm sure you will see another bell work with a Ken-Ken on it in the future, so we'll just try to do it the same way. All right, so for the next thing, we're going to be looking at a very short video about personal umbrella protection. So I'm going to play that video for you. It'll take about a minute and a half, and then we'll come back and work on the questions that are posted here.
Hey, Matt McCoy here. Personal umbrella protection coverage is an important and relatively inexpensive way to protect your finances. But how does it work? Your car and home insurance policies have liability limits. In other words, the maximum amount your policy will pay to others to cover damages that you're responsible for. But what happens if you're sued for more than your policy covers? Once your underlying policy limits are exceeded, you may have to pay the rest out of your own pocket. That's where umbrella protection comes in. Umbrella protection extends your liability limits, providing you with additional protection if you're found responsible for an accident. It applies to a number of situations, such as injuries to someone else, damage to someone else's property, and even damages resulting from things like slander or wrongful eviction. If any of these occur and you're held legally liable, umbrella protection can help cover your excess cost, up to $1 million for a standard policy. $2 million and $5 million policies are also available in most states. Just remember, first, you're required to carry certain underlying limits on your home and auto policies. Contact the Hartford to help you determine the personal umbrella protection coverage.
Okay, we don't need to be contacting the Hartford to get personal umbrella protection, but let's talk about how it works and the math behind it. Okay, so an umbrella policy is going to cover beyond the liability limits of your renter's insurance policy or your homeowner's insurance policy when you own a home later. So in this first example, Farron has $100,000 of liability coverage on the renter's insurance policy. So what that's going to cover is if somebody gets injured at his house, up to that $100,000 limit, the renter's insurance policy will cover those injuries. So he throws a Thanksgiving dinner, one of his guests falls down the stairwell, sues for damages, including their inability to work. Lawsuit is for $150,000. Would having an umbrella policy help? So think about what the definition of umbrella policy is, which is what you just saw. Would this kick in here? Would it be worth having? So make an answer and then I'll reveal. Okay, so in this case, it would help because it is a liability claim. It's owed to a guest and it exceeds the coverage limit because the coverage limit is lower than what the lawsuit says. So assuming he has an umbrella policy for $1 million, how much would his renter's insurance pay? So you gotta look at what the lawsuit's worth and what the liability coverage for the renter's insurance policy limit is. So as you can see, since the lawsuit is more and the coverage is of $100,000, that renter's insurance is going to pay for the first $100,000 of the lawsuit. That's the limit on the policy. So it can't pay more than that. How much would the umbrella policy pay? Well, consider what the purpose of the umbrella policy is. It is to cover in excess of your liability. So in this case, the excess would be found by subtracting the amount in the lawsuit minus the amount of coverage they have, and you would end up with $50,000. So the umbrella policy would pay the extra $50,000. It's the remaining liability. How much would Farron have to pay? Consider this. And we don't have a deductible here because it's a liability claim. So that's something to remember. Liability claims never have a deductible. Never, ever. Not in any kind of policy, auto or homeowners. So it is $0 that Farron would have to pay. Now, if they didn't have an umbrella policy, then Farron would be on the hook for the remaining $50,000. So that's the concept there. All right, Leanne, in part 2 here. She has, so first you want to determine how much your assets come to and compare that to the coverage offered by your standard policy. So let's suppose that she's got $300,000 of coverage from her homeowner's insurance, and she's got $300,000 per accident limit on her motorcycle policy's liability coverage. So we've got 300 and 300. Keep that in mind. Top of page 62, let's look at her assets. So I have circled the ones that are considered assets here. Assets are things that somebody owns that have value. It is not something that is a rolling income, like your monthly pay is not considered an asset because it's month to month, it is, or week to week. It is not something that you can tangibly hold. So that's not considered an asset. A credit card is not an asset because you always have to pay it back. Student loan debt is actually a liability. It is not an asset. You look at these things that I've circled though, a house, something that has value, a savings account has value, motorcycle, CDs is a type of savings vehicle, so that has value. Same thing with Roth IRA, that's a retirement account. And then your baseball collection or any other kind of valuable that you could put a number on is considered an asset. So if you are sued for an amount that exceeds your liability limit, then the excess charges could be taken from your assets, and that could be your savings account, or it could be that you're required to sell something that has value. So if somebody's going to come after your assets when you have a lawsuit that's above your insurance policy, that's when it's good to have another policy. So is Leanne a good candidate for an umbrella policy here? If you add up all these assets, just take a second to add those up and see what you get. All right. So I'm coming in well under $300,000. So there would not be a situation where her assets would exceed her liability coverage. So her liability coverage is going to take care of her. Leanne forgot about her rich uncle. He says he's leaving her $950,000 when he dies. Does this change your answer? Okay, so in this case, we want to say now her assets are all of these things plus the 950. So should we get it? Well, you could definitely argue yes at this point, except that she doesn't have the 950,000 yet. So if she waits until her uncle dies, then her assets will exceed liability, but not now. And if something were to happen right now, nobody can sue her and get access to a future asset. They can only get access to things you already currently own. So while she should definitely keep it in mind that she's going to want an umbrella policy once she has all that money, she does not need that umbrella policy yet. So once again, the purpose of an umbrella policy is if something goes wrong and you are liable. So it's a liability protection against somebody getting hurt or property getting damaged that is your fault. And so after your liability maximum is exceeded, that's when assets would be seized. That's when you would lose money or things of value. And so to protect you against that, the umbrella policy covers the rest. Right? So the next thing to do is go to Google Classroom and pull up the classwork tab, find exit ticket 10.8. Carefully do those. You can look back in your packet if you want to. You can keep that open and work from there if you like. But just answer those 3 questions there carefully. Then also in Google Classroom in the classwork tab is a PDF of the vocab terms that we did yesterday. So I'd like you to take a few minutes with that and review your vocab for tomorrow's test. All right, once all that's done, if you have other work that you'd like to do, you can do that. You can other test prep would be to go back through the packet and try to find other vocab terms that you could use to review. But if you feel good about tomorrow's test, then you can just find work to do for another class. All right.